He almost drove past them, until he saw the metal box they were protecting with their lives. What was inside would reveal a secret that connected them 34 years ago. Subscribe now. This changes everything. The storm punished Seattle with unusual fury for October. Raindrops hammered the windshield of the black Tesla as James Mitchell adjusted the rearview mirror, exhausted after 3 days of relentless negotiations in San Francisco. At 42, he had built a tech empire that many envied. But that night, it weighed on him like invisible chains. His mansion in Bellevue awaited him, silent, empty, cold as always. The automated gate began to open when the sensors detected the vehicle. James slowed down, ready to enter the heated garage, until something completely unexpected caught his attention. 2 silhouettes were huddled under the old oak tree outside the high wall, trying to protect themselves from the violent storm. Frowning, he stopped the car and lowered the electric window. They were an elderly man and woman, soaked clothes clinging to their bodies, embraced as if they were the only refuge left in the world. Beside them, a worn leather suitcase leaned against the tree trunk. But there was something else, a small metal box that the man protected with his body, as if guarding something more valuable than life itself. James's instinct was to accelerate and just go in. After all, Seattle was full of people in difficult situations. He couldn't solve everyone's problems, but something about that scene disturbed him deeply. Perhaps it was the way the elderly man covered the woman with his own body, or how she clung to him with a trust that defied the storm. The man must have noticed the headlights, because he slowly raised his head. Even through the torrential rain, it was possible to see a dignity in that aged face that touched something very deep in the businessman's chest. James sat there, engine running, watching. The woman began to cough, a weak sound that still reached him through the storm and car window. Something inside him broke. He turned off the engine, grabbed the umbrella from the back seat, and stepped out into the storm. Each step toward the elderly couple felt heavy, as if he were walking against years of cultivated indifference. The man stood up with difficulty when he saw James approaching, instinctively placing himself in front of the woman and the metal box. "Good evening," James said, raising his voice over the rain. "Are you both all right?" The man studied him for a few moments. "We are, sir. Just waiting for the storm to pass." "Waiting where? Out here on the street?" James asked, incredulous. "We have nowhere to go," the woman replied, with a soft voice but laden with sadness. "We were evicted this morning. We couldn't find shelter." The word evicted echoed in James's mind strangely, awakening memories he preferred to keep buried. "Evicted from where?" "From the house where we lived for 40 years, the man explained. "Things got complicated financially after my wife became ill." "What about your family? Children? Relatives?" The silence that followed was more eloquent than any answer. The woman lowered her head. The man pressed his lips together as if swallowing bitter words. "Our son has his own life," he finally said. "We don't want to be a burden." James knew that kind of response. It was dignity trying to disguise rejection. "What are your names?" "I'm Robert," the man replied, extending a calloused but clean hand. "This is my wife, Grace. We've been married for 48 years. 48 years. James could barely imagine sharing life with someone for that long. "James," he introduced himself. "Look, you can't stay out here in the storm all night. It's dangerous." "Don't worry about us, sir," Grace said, trying to smile. "We've been through worse." That phrase hit him like a punch. We've been through worse. How many battles had these two fought together? "You can stay at my house tonight," the words came out before he could fully process them. "Just until you can get organized." Robert and Grace looked at each other in surprise. "Mr. James, we don't want to cause trouble," Robert said. "You don't even know us. You seem like decent people. Nobody deserves to spend the night like this." Grace had another coughing fit, stronger this time, and that sealed the decision. "Come on, get your things." Robert helped Grace stand and picked up both the suitcase and the metal box, with a care that deeply intrigued James. What was inside that box that seemed so precious? The housekeeper, Margaret, nearly dropped her tea tray when she saw James enter through the front door, accompanied by 2 soaked elderly people. She had worked in that house for 15 years and had never seen her employer bring anyone home, much less homeless people. "Margaret," James said, removing his wet coat, "please prepare the second-floor guest room for Mr. Robert and Mrs. Grace and see if there are dry clothes that might fit them." Sir? Margaret whispered, clearly uncomfortable. Are you sure? I am. And prepare hot tea. They're freezing. Robert and Grace stood in the entrance hall, dripping water onto the marble floor, clearly intimidated by the luxury surrounding them. The house was immense, decorated with expensive furniture and artwork worth more than many people earned in a lifetime. Please, make yourselves at home, James said, though the phrase sounded strange even to him. When was the last time anyone had felt at home there? Mr. James, Grace said with a choked voice, we don't know how to thank you. It's been so long since anyone treated us with such kindness. The phrase hit James unexpectedly. It's been so long since anyone treated us with kindness. How is it possible for two people to reach a point where a simple gesture of humanity became something rare and precious? You don't need to thank me. It's the least anyone would do. No, sir, Robert said, shaking his head. It's not. We spent all day asking for help, knocking on doors, and you were the first person who looked at us as human beings. The weight of those words lingered in the air. James realized that it had also been a long time since anyone had looked at him as a human being, and not as a business opportunity or a walking bank account. Margaret returned with fluffy towels and dry clothes. The room is ready, sir, she announced, though her tone made it clear she didn't approve of the situation. When the housekeeper left, silence took over the environment again. James watched Robert helping Grace up the stairs, noticing how careful he was with each of her movements, as if she were made of crystal. There was love in those gestures, true love, tested by time and difficulties. Rest well, James said when they reached the second floor. Tomorrow we'll talk more. Good night, Mr. James, Grace said. May God bless you for your kindness. James stood in the hallway after the bedroom door closed, trying to process what had happened. In less than an hour, his routine had been completely altered by two complete strangers. From the room, he could hear low voices talking. Robert and Grace seemed to be having an intimate conversation, whispering like two teenagers sharing secrets. When was the last time he had someone he could talk to like that? Someone who truly cared about his fears and dreams. But something else bothered him. That metal box Robert protected so carefully. What secrets did it hold? The next morning arrived differently in that house. For the first time in years, James woke to sounds that weren't just the usual silence of the empty mansion. Low voices came from downstairs, soft conversations that brought a strange sensation of life pulsing between those cold walls. He went downstairs, still in his robe, and found Robert and Grace sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast prepared by Margaret. The housekeeper was visibly uncomfortable, serving the elderly couple with brusque movements and a closed expression. "Good morning," James greeted, noticing how Grace looked better after a night's rest. Her eyes had a liveliness that the rain and exhaustion had hidden the previous night. "Mr. James," she smiled in a way that lit up the entire kitchen. "We didn't know if we should come down. Margaret prepared this wonderful breakfast for us." Margaret cleared her throat, making it clear it hadn't been by choice. "Sir, I need to talk to you when possible." "Later, Margaret. Right now I want to get to know our guests better." James sat at the table, something he rarely did. He usually had coffee quickly while standing, reading emails on his phone. But there was something comforting about that domestic scene that made him slow down. "Robert," he said, pouring himself coffee, "tell me about yourselves. How did you end up in this situation?" The elderly man exchanged a heavy look with Grace before responding. "It's a long story, sir. I don't even know where to begin." "Start at the beginning." Robert sighed deeply, as if about to open a still sensitive wound. "I was a civil engineer. I worked for decades building schools, community hospitals, orphanages, mainly social projects. I always believed my work could make a difference in people's lives." "What kind of projects?" "I built 22 public schools in rural areas, 15 small hospitals in underserved communities, and 8 orphanages that still operate today." James almost choked on his coffee. Robert wasn't just any homeless elderly man. He was someone who had dedicated his life to building things that mattered. "Grace was always my partner in this journey," Robert continued, taking his wife's hand. "She was a music teacher, taught underprivileged children to play instruments. She established 4 community choirs that performed in major theaters. I always said that music heals the soul," Grace added with her soft voice. "I saw street kids transform when they discovered they could create something beautiful." James was fascinated. These two people had dedicated decades to helping others, and now they were abandoned, with no one to help them. The irony was cruel. What happened then? How did you go from that life to this? Our only son, Daniel, Robert finished with bitterness. He was always ashamed of what we did. He said we were fools, wasting time helping people who didn't deserve it. He wanted me to build commercial buildings, shopping malls, things that made real money. Daniel became a corporate lawyer, Grace said, and there was pain in her voice. A very successful one. He married a woman from a wealthy family. They were ashamed of us, ashamed of our social projects, of our simplicity. Ashamed. James couldn't believe it. Yes, Robert confirmed. When Daniel started moving in higher social circles, he asked us not to tell anyone he was our son. He said our image hurt his career. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. James felt something stirring inside his chest, a mixture of anger and sadness he couldn't explain. But what Robert said next would change everything James thought he knew about his own past. Years passed without much contact, Grace continued. When I discovered I was seriously ill. Ill? James interrupted, worried. Grace hesitated, exchanging glances with Robert. It's a delicate heart condition. Nothing that can't be treated, but it's expensive. Very expensive. We reached out to Daniel, Robert said. Not to ask for money, but to say we wanted to be close to family in our final years. We wanted to get to know our grandson better. You have a grandson? Tyler. A wonderful young man. But Daniel always made excuses not to let us see the boy. He said he didn't want his son growing up with bad life examples. James felt his blood boil. How could a son treat his own parents that way? Even so, we kept trying to reach out, Grace said. When we lost the house because we couldn't afford the medical treatment, we called Daniel. We thought he would help us temporarily. And did he help? James already knew the answer. He said we were adults responsible for our own choices. Robert laughed bitterly. That if we had chosen to help strangers our whole lives instead of thinking about the future, we should face the consequences. And he hung up the phone. He hung up, Grace added, a tear rolling down her face. James was incredulous. Hung up the phone on his own parents. That wasn't all, Robert continued, his voice trembling with contained emotion. We learned from neighbors that Daniel spread word to acquaintances that we were problematic people, that we had always made wrong choices in life. He said he had no responsibility for our decisions. Margaret, who had been listening from the kitchen corner, seemed increasingly uncomfortable. She had never witnessed such an intimate and painful conversation in that house. Mr. James, she interrupted, can I speak with you in private? Not now, Margaret. But sir, I said not now. James's sharp tone made Margaret retreat, surprised. She rarely heard him raise his voice that way. I apologize, James addressed the couple. Please continue. There's not much more to tell, Robert said. After the eviction, we tried looking for public shelters, but they're all full. We spent 3 days sleeping on the streets before arriving here yesterday. 3 days on the streets? James could barely believe it. Yes. And you know what hurts the most? Grace asked, wiping her eyes. It's not the hunger, not the cold. It's knowing we built homes for hundreds of orphaned children, but our own son can't find a little corner in his house for his own parents. Grace's words echoed through the kitchen like a silent cry of pain. James felt something strange happening inside him. These people had dedicated their entire lives to helping others and were now paying the price for having an ungrateful son. Can I see the suitcase you brought? James asked, moved by sudden curiosity. Robert seemed to hesitate. Why do you want to see it? Last night I noticed how carefully you cared for it. It seemed important. The couple looked at each other again. After a few seconds, Robert nodded. Grace, can you get it? She stood slowly and returned minutes later with the worn leather suitcase. She placed it on the kitchen table and opened it carefully, as if opening a treasure chest. James leaned in to see the contents and was speechless. The suitcase was full of photographs, letters, newspaper clippings, diplomas, and documents carefully organized. They were decades of a life dedicated to others. These are the children from our orphanages, Grace explained, showing hundreds of photos of smiling children. Each one has a story. Each one found a family. And these are the graduations from the schools I built, Robert pointed to other photos. Thousands of children who could study because of the projects we developed. James picked up one of the letters. It was from a child written in childish handwriting. Uncle Robert and Aunt Grace, thank you for building our school. Now I know how to read and write. When I grow up, I'll help other children just like you helped us. We received hundreds of letters like this over the years, Grace said proudly. Each one saved with care. That's why the suitcase is so important, Robert explained. They're the only proof we have that our life meant something. James felt his chest tighten. These people had impacted thousands of lives, built legacies that would last generations, and now they carried it all in an old suitcase because they had nothing else. There's one more thing, Grace said hesitantly, taking a yellowed envelope from the bottom of the suitcase. Something you might find interesting. What is it? A thank you letter we received many years ago from a young man we helped in a difficult situation. James took the envelope and saw his own name written in childish handwriting. His hands began to tremble when he opened it and recognized the letter he had written as a child. "My God," he whispered, "how do you have this?" Robert and Grace smiled for the first time since they started telling their story. "Mr. James," Grace said softly, "fate has mysterious ways of bringing the right people together at the right time." And in that instant, James understood that the encounter in the rain had not been a coincidence. It had been the universe returning a kindness he had forgotten he once received. But there was still the mystery of the metal box, and what it contained would reveal an even deeper connection. James's hands trembled, holding that yellowed letter he had written as a child. The infantile words jumped from the paper like ghosts from the past. "Uncle Robert and Aunt Grace, thank you for helping me when Mom was sick. You were my angels. One day I'll be rich, and I'll help children just like you helped me. James Mitchell, 8 years old." "You remember me?" he asked, his voice coming out hoarser than expected. Grace smiled with maternal tenderness. "How could we forget? You were such a brave boy. You took care of your mother with so much love." The memories began returning like waves breaking on the shore of James's consciousness. He was 8 when his mother became gravely ill. With no money for private treatment and the public system overloaded, she was given up on. That's when Robert and Grace appeared in their lives. "You built that community hospital," James murmured, remembering. "St. Clara Hospital. My mother was one of the first patients." "Your mother, Sarah Mitchell," Robert said, smiling. "A warrior woman. She fought bravely against the illness. And you stayed at the hospital every day," Grace added. "You brought flowers you picked from the vacant lot near your house. You always said the flowers would heal Mom faster." James closed his eyes, feeling his chest tighten. He had blocked these memories for so long that he almost convinced himself they didn't exist. His mother had been cured at the hospital Robert built, and Grace had organized musical performances to cheer patients during treatment. "You saved my mother," he said, looking directly into the eyes of the 2 elderly people. "And now you're here, abandoned, needing help. Life takes strange turns. Sometimes we plant seeds without knowing where they'll sprout," Robert responded philosophically. Margaret, who had listened to the entire conversation from the kitchen corner, finally approached with an altered expression. "Mr. James, can I speak with you now? It's urgent." "What is it, Margaret?" "There's a man at the door. Says he's a lawyer and came to get his parents." James's blood ran cold. "Lawyer?" "Yes, sir. Daniel Morrison. Says the people here are his parents and they're causing public embarrassment to the family." Robert and Grace paled instantly. Fear stamped on their faces in a way that broke James's heart. "He came to get us?" Grace asked with a trembling voice. "After abandoning us?" "Not to take you home," Margaret said, embarrassed. "I heard him talking on the phone. Something about a facility for the elderly." "A facility?" James exploded. "He wants to institutionalize his own parents." Robert stood slowly, with the dignity of someone who had faced many battles in life. "Let's talk to him. We don't want to cause problems for you, James." "You're not going anywhere," James said firmly. "This is my house and you are my guests." They walked to the entrance hall where Daniel Morrison waited impatiently. He was a man in his mid-40s, expensive suit, gold watch on his wrist, that air of superiority some people confuse with success. Beside him was an elegant woman who clearly preferred to be anywhere else. "Dad, Mom," Daniel said with no emotion in his voice. "I came to get you. You're causing an embarrassing situation for our family." "Embarrassing how?" Grace asked, hurt. "Neighbors called saying you were begging on the streets. This affects my professional reputation." "We weren't begging," Robert defended with dignity. "We were just looking for shelter." "It's the same thing," Daniel responded coldly. My wife Patricia and I decided you need specialized care. Patricia, the wife, remained silent, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. It was clear that decision hadn't been consensual. What kind of care? James intervened, studying Daniel carefully. And who are you? Daniel asked with barely disguised contempt. James Mitchell, the owner of this house where your parents found shelter when their own son abandoned them. The response was like a slap in Daniel's face. He didn't expect to be confronted that way. My parents are my responsibility, he shot back. They always made wrong choices in life, spent everything helping strangers instead of thinking about the future. Now they need to face the consequences. Consequences? James could barely believe the coldness of that man. Your parents built hospitals, schools, orphanages. They saved thousands of lives and became poor because of it. And foolishly threw away opportunities, Daniel retorted. While others got rich, they played saints. Now they want me to solve the situation? Grace began crying softly. Seeing her own son speak that way was destroying her heart. But what Daniel didn't know was that James had already discovered the truth about the inheritance. And the metal box Robert protected so carefully contained the proof that would change everything. The real battle was just beginning. Daniel, Grace said with a choked voice, we never asked you for anything. We just wanted to be close to family. Close to family? He laughed bitterly. You want our money? Just like you always wanted others' money for your projects. That's not true, Robert said, his voice trembling with contained indignation. We never asked you for a penny. You didn't need to ask. You showed up at my door like beggars. My work colleagues found out my parents are going through hardship. This hurts me professionally. James felt rage growing inside him like lava from a volcano. This man was more concerned with his own image than his parents' well-being. So what's your solution? He asked. I've already arranged a spot at a specialized geriatric care facility, Daniel responded mechanically. It's a discreet place far from the city. They'll have adequate medical assistance. Far from the city? Grace repeated, horrified. You want to hide us? I want you to have the treatment you need. Daniel lied shamelessly. Patricia finally spoke, her voice coming out low and embarrassed. Daniel, maybe we should talk more about this. There's nothing to talk about. He cut off his wife. The decision is made. That's when James made the decision that would change everything. Your parents aren't going anywhere, he declared. Robert and Grace will stay here in my house for as long as they want. Daniel laughed with disdain. You don't even know them well. You don't know what kind of people you're getting involved with. I know exactly what kind of people I'm getting involved with, James responded, looking directly into Daniel's eyes. I'm getting involved with people who saved my mother's life when I was 8 years old. People who built the hospital where she was cured. The information hit Daniel like a punch in the stomach. He didn't expect there to be a personal connection. Your parents are heroes, James continued. And if you can't see that, the problem is yours, not theirs. Heroes, Daniel mocked. Heroes don't end their lives on the streets. They do when they have ungrateful children who care more about appearances than character. The tension in the hall was electric. Patricia pulled Daniel by the arm, trying to calm the situation. Daniel, let's leave, she whispered. We can talk about this at home. There's nothing to talk about, he repeated. But now his voice came out less sure. My parents are coming with me now. They're not, James said firmly. Unless they want to, and I'm sure they don't. All eyes turned to Robert and Grace. The couple looked at each other, communicating silently, as only people married for decades can do. Daniel, Robert finally said, his voice loaded with deep sadness. You made it very clear you're ashamed of us, that our presence hurts your life. We won't bother you anymore. Dad, no. You made your choice when you abandoned us on the streets 3 days ago. Now we make ours. And what is your choice? Daniel asked, trying to maintain his authoritative tone. To stay with people who treat us as human beings, Grace responded, wiping away tears. People who see value in what we built throughout life. Daniel turned red with anger. You'll regret this. When this man gets tired of you, don't come looking for me. We won't, Robert confirmed. You made that very clear, Daniel. Patricia called her husband, now visibly emotional. Please, let's talk at home. Your parents don't deserve this. Shut up, Patricia, Daniel exploded. You don't understand anything about the situation. The harshness with his own wife revealed Daniel's character even more. James realized Patricia was also suffering in that marriage. "Mr. Morrison," James said, maintaining calm, "I suggest you leave my property. Your parents have given their answer." "This won't end here," Daniel threatened. "I'll take appropriate legal measures." "Feel free," James responded, "but know that your parents are under my protection now." Daniel left stomping hard, dragging Patricia by the arm. Before getting in the car, she looked back and waved discreetly to her in-laws, a gesture of affection that didn't go unnoticed. When the car disappeared down the street, Grace collapsed in Robert's arms, crying all the tears she had held during her son's visit. "We lost our son," she sobbed. "We lost our family." "You didn't lose anyone," James said, placing his hand on her shoulder. "You gained a new family, a family that recognizes your value." Robert looked at James with infinite gratitude in his eyes. "Why are you doing this for us?" "Because you did this for me when I was a child," James replied simply, "and because it's the right thing to do." In that moment, Margaret approached with a completely different expression from the morning. "Mr. James," she said respectfully, "may I prepare a special lunch to celebrate?" "Celebrate what, Margaret?" "The fact that this house finally has a real family." And for the first time in 15 years, James felt his mansion had become a home. But the metal box still held secrets. And what was inside would reveal the final truth about Daniel's real intentions, and an inheritance worth millions that would change everything. The following days brought a strange peace to James's mansion. For the first time, the hallways echoed with conversations, soft laughter, and the sound of Grace humming while helping Margaret in the kitchen. The housekeeper, who had initially resisted the elderly couple's presence, now treated them like family, enchanted by their genuine kindness. James had canceled several business meetings to spend more time at home, fascinated by the stories Robert and Grace shared. Each account revealed the dimension of impact they had caused in thousands of lives. But it was on a sunny afternoon that the most shocking discovery came to light. "Robert," James said while having coffee on the veranda, "tell me about the business people you helped over the years." The elderly man smiled nostalgically. "There were many, James. We always believed that supporting people with good intentions was the best way to multiply good." "Anyone specific you remember?" "There's one case I never forgot. A young businessman who was on the verge of bankruptcy 15 years ago. Family business, many employees depending on him. He was desperate." James felt something strange in his chest. 15 years ago. Yes, the company was called Mitchell Technologies. The young man was Sarah Mitchell's son, that wonderful lady we treated at the hospital. The coffee escaped from James's hands, spilling on the table. "Mitchell Technologies. That was my company." Robert stopped talking, his eyes widening. "Your company?" "Yes. 15 years ago I was going bankrupt. I had overdue loans, employees to lay off. I was losing everything I had built after my mother's death." "My God," Grace murmured, joining the conversation. "So you're that young man Robert helped anonymously?" James was in shock. "Helped how? I never knew about anonymous help." Robert exchanged glances with Grace before responding. "We used our savings to pay off your bank loans. We did everything through lawyers without revealing our identity. We wanted you to believe you had succeeded on your own." You saved my company?" "We saved because we knew your character," Robert explained. "You kept all employees employed, even having no money to pay them. You preferred to go hungry rather than lay people off. That showed us who you really were. But that money, where did it come from?" "It was everything we had," Grace said simply. "Our retirement, life savings. But it was worth it seeing how you made the company grow afterward." James couldn't process the information. "You spent everything you had to save my company." "Why?" "Because we believed in you," Robert responded. "And because your mother asked us to take care of you if something happened to her." "My mother asked that?" "In her last days at the hospital, Sarah called us and said, 'My son will need guardian angels. Promise you'll protect him when I'm no longer here.'" Tears began rolling down James's face. His whole life had been a lie. He hadn't won alone. He wasn't the brilliant businessman he thought he was. He had been saved by the kindness of people who sacrificed everything for him. "So you lost all your money to help me," he said, his voice choked. "And that's why you're in need now." "Don't see it that way," Grace asked. "See it as an investment that worked out. You became a successful man, generated jobs, helped other families. But you were left with nothing." "We were left with the satisfaction of having kept our promise to your mother," Robert said serenely. At that moment, Margaret appeared on the veranda with a worried expression. "Mr. James, there's someone at the door wanting to speak with Mr. Robert and Mrs. Grace." "Who is it?" "A young man. Says he's their grandson." Grace turned pale. "Tyler. My grandson Tyler." "Yes, Ma'am. That's the name he said." Grace stood trembling, hands going to her chest. "My little grandson, after so many years." The three headed to the front door, where a young man of approximately 20 years waited nervously. He was tall, dark hair, intelligent eyes that reminded them very much of Grace. He wore simple clothes and carried a backpack on his back. "Grandpa, Grandma," he said with an emotional voice upon seeing Robert and Grace. "Tyler!" Grace ran to hug her grandson, crying copiously. "My boy, how did you find us?" "I looked for you for months," he explained, also hugging Robert. "When I found out Dad had abandoned you, I left home to find you." "Left home?" Robert asked, worried. "Yes. I couldn't live in the same house as a man capable of abandoning his own parents." James watched the scene moved. Finally, there was someone from the family who valued those two extraordinary elderly people. "Tyler, this is James," Grace introduced. "The angel who took us in when we had nowhere to go." The young man approached James with gratitude in his eyes. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you for taking care of my grandparents. They took care of me my whole life," James responded. "I owe gratitude to them." "Tyler," Robert said, "how did you leave home? What about your mother?" The young man lowered his head, embarrassed. "Mom doesn't know I'm here. Dad forbade any contact with you. He said you were problematic people who only brought shame to the family." "And did you believe that?" Grace asked, hurt. "Never. I remember you from my childhood. I remember the stories you told, the hospitals you built, the children you helped. Dad may have forgotten, but I never forgot." Tyler took an old, worn notebook from his backpack. "I kept everything you gave me, drawings, stories, sheet music Grandma wrote." Grace took the notebook with trembling hands. "You kept all this?" "I kept because I knew I'd find you again one day, and because I wanted to preserve the memory of the important things you did." "Tyler," Robert said, moved, "you grew up and became a man of character." "I learned from the best teachers," the young man replied. "Even from a distance, you continued teaching me about kindness and generosity." "But how did you find us?" Grace asked. "I searched every shelter in the city, hospitals, churches. Yesterday, someone told me they'd seen an elderly couple being taken in by a businessman in this neighborhood. I came here hoping." James felt his chest warm. "Tyler, your grandparents can stay here as long as they want. You too, Mr. James," Tyler said hesitantly. "I need to tell you something important about my father." "What about him?" "He didn't stop here. He's planning something against you, Grandpa and Grandma." James's blood ran cold. "What kind of thing?" "I heard him talking with other lawyers. Something about getting a court order to institutionalize you, Grandpa and Grandma, claiming you're incapable of taking care of yourselves." Robert and Grace looked at each other terrified. "But that's not all," Tyler continued. "I discovered you have an inheritance Dad wants to control." "Inheritance?" Grace asked, confused. "What inheritance? We have nothing." "You do. Great-great-grandfather's will, Grandpa's father. He left land that's worth millions today. Dad can only access it if he proves you're incapable, or if he gets custody of you." The revelation fell like a bomb on everyone. Daniel didn't just want to get rid of his parents. He wanted to steal their inheritance. "That's why he was so interested in institutionalizing you," James understood. "To have legal control over the assets." "Exactly. And there's one more thing," Tyler said, taking papers from his backpack. "I found these documents in his office." James took the papers, and as he read, his expression became increasingly somber. "My God," he murmured. "Daniel is planning a complete setup." "What does it say there?" Robert asked apprehensively. "He's going to claim you're suffering from age-related mental problems. He even has doctors already bribed to give false reports." Daniel's evil knew no bounds. He was willing to destroy his own parents' dignity to steal their money. "We won't let that happen," James said determinedly. "I'll use all my resources to protect you." "But Mr. James," Tyler said worriedly, "my father has powerful connections. He can get what he wants. Then we'll have to be smarter than him." And in that moment, James knew the battle was only beginning. The revelation about the inheritance had completely changed the scenario. James spent the night analyzing the documents Tyler brought, discovering an even dirtier plot than he imagined. Daniel didn't just want to get rid of his parents. He was planning an elaborate farce to steal millions that belonged to them. The next morning, James called his private attorney, Dr. Henry Moore, one of the best criminal lawyers in the city. When Henry arrived at the mansion and saw the documents, he was impressed by the cruelty of the scheme. "James, this here is a complex conspiracy," Henry said, leafing through the papers. "Daniel set up a network of people willing to lie under oath to get what he wants." "Can we stop it?" James asked anxiously. "We can, but it's going to be a difficult battle. He has connections in the judiciary, doctors willing to falsify reports. We'll need solid evidence." Robert, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "Dr. Henry, there's something that might help our cause." "What would that be?" The elderly man went to the leather suitcase and took out a yellowed folder no one had seen before. "Documents proving all the donations we made throughout our lives. Every school, every hospital, every orphanage, everything registered at the notary." Henry took the documents, and his eyes widened. "My God, you donated over $30 million in social projects over 40 years. "We never publicized it," Grace confirmed. "We didn't do charity to show off." "This changes everything," Henry exclaimed. "People with mental problems couldn't administer donations of this magnitude with such precision." "There's more," Robert continued, taking out another envelope. "Thank you letters from mayors, governors, even from the president recognizing our social work." Tyler approached, moved. "Grandpa, I never knew you were so important." "We never wanted to be important," Robert said humbly. "We wanted to be useful." Henry was fascinated by the documents. "Gentlemen, you have here the history of a life dedicated to others. This completely destroys any claim of mental incapacity." "But Daniel has bribed doctors," James reminded, worried. "And we have something better, the truth. I'll get reputable doctors to do a real evaluation of Mr. Robert and Mrs. Grace's mental capacity." At that moment, Margaret appeared with an alarmed expression. "Mr. James, there's strange movement on the street. Cars parked for hours watching the house. Everyone ran to the window. Outside, 3 discrete cars were strategically positioned with people inside watching the mansion." "Daniel is watching us," Tyler said, frightened. "He must be planning something." "What kind of thing?" Grace asked with a trembling voice. "Maybe a forced approach," Henry suggested. "If he gets an emergency court order claiming imminent risk, he can try to institutionalize you by force." James felt his blood boil. "They won't get anywhere near them." "Calm down, James," Henry asked. "Let's use intelligence. I need you to leave the city for a few days while I organize our defense." "Leave where?" Robert asked. "I have a country house in a neighboring town. You'd be safe there while I prepare the necessary documents." "What if Daniel discovers where we are?" Grace worried. "He won't discover. Only people I trust know about that location." Tyler approached his grandparents. "I'm going with you. I won't leave you alone at this moment." "My dear grandson," Grace said emotionally, hugging the young man. "You have the courage your father lost along the way." "I learned courage from you," Tyler replied. "Even when Dad tried to keep me away, the lessons you taught me remained here," he said, touching his chest. Henry began organizing the strategic exit. "We'll do it like this. Margaret will leave normally to shop, drawing the watcher's attention. Meanwhile, you exit through the back garage in my car." "And me?" James asked. "You stay here. If Daniel comes with the warrant, we need someone to receive him and buy time." An hour later, the plan was executed perfectly. Robert, Grace, and Tyler managed to leave undetected, while James remained at the mansion, awaiting Daniel's next move. The wait didn't last long. Late afternoon, a convoy arrived at the door. Daniel, 2 court officers, an unknown doctor, and Patricia, who seemed extremely embarrassed by the situation. "Where are my parents?" Daniel asked aggressively when James opened the door. "In a safe place, far from sons who only want to harm them. I have here a court order for urgent medical evaluation," one of the officers said, showing the papers. "Allegation of risk to the elderly's physical integrity." "What risk?" James asked, taking the document. "According to the petitioner, the elderly show signs of mental confusion and may put themselves in danger." "That's a lie and you know it," James accused, looking directly at Daniel. "It's true," Daniel lied shamelessly. "My parents are ill. They need specialized care." "More specialized care? Or do you need legal control over them?" "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your great-grandfather's inheritance," The land worth millions that you can only access if you get custody of your parents. The silence that followed was revealing. Daniel didn't expect James to know about the inheritance. I don't know what you're talking about, he tried to disguise. I know everything, Daniel. I know about the bribed doctors, about the false reports you ordered, about the whole scheme to steal your parents' money. Patricia, who had been quiet until then, finally exploded. Daniel, I can't keep pretending I don't know what's happening. Patricia, shut up, he shouted. I won't shut up. Your parents are wonderful people and you're trying to destroy them for money. You don't understand anything about the situation. I understand. I understand you're doing something horrible, and I won't be an accomplice. The argument between Daniel and Patricia revealed his character even more. The court officers began feeling uncomfortable with the situation. Mr. Morrison, one of them said, if there are irregularities in this process, we need to reevaluate it. There are no irregularities, Daniel insisted desperately. Oh yes, there are, James said, taking out copies of the documents Tyler had brought. Here's proof of the conspiracy he set up. The officer took the papers, and as he read, his expression changed. Mr. Morrison, these documents suggest procedural fraud. That's a lie. A setup. A setup? Patricia laughed bitterly. Daniel, you're calling your own son a liar. Tyler? Daniel turned pale. What does Tyler have to do with this? He was the one who brought these documents, James explained. Your own son can't live with your attitudes anymore. Where is Tyler? Daniel asked desperately. With his grandparents, where he should always be. Daniel seemed to crumble. His own son's betrayal had destroyed all his plans. Sir, the officer addressed James, we'll need to suspend this warrant until there's an investigation of these allegations. You can't do that, Daniel shouted. We can and we will, the officer responded firmly. Procedural fraud is a serious crime. The doctor accompanying Daniel tried to slip away discreetly, but James intercepted him. Doctor, you're not going anywhere. Your participation in this scheme will also be investigated. I didn't know anything, the doctor stammered. Didn't know you were going to falsify medical reports? Didn't know you were going to destroy the lives of two innocent elderly people? Patricia approached James. Sir, can I speak with my in-laws? I want to ask forgiveness for everything Daniel did. Of course. They'll be glad to know at least you kept your heart in the right place. Daniel was completely defeated. His plans had crumbled. His wife had abandoned him. His son was against him, and now he faced investigation for fraud. Daniel, James said, there's still time to do the right thing. Your parents still love you, despite everything. It's too late, Daniel murmured. It's never too late for a son to ask his parents for forgiveness. But Daniel had already left, fleeing from his own conscience and the consequences of his acts. When the convoy left, James called Henry with the good news. The fraud investigation would protect Robert and Grace, and soon they could return home, to the home where they were finally treated like family. But there was still one secret to reveal. The metal box Robert protected so carefully contained something that would change everything. And that final revelation would bring the ultimate truth about Daniel's true nature and a legacy that transcended money. 3 days had passed since Daniel had been unmasked. Robert, Grace, and Tyler returned to James's mansion with the feeling they could finally live in peace. But tranquility was short-lived. Dr. Henry arrived one morning with a somber expression and a folder full of documents. James, we have problems, he announced, spreading papers over the living room table. Daniel didn't give up. He got support from very influential people. What do you mean? James asked, feeling a chill down his spine. I discovered the inheritance at stake is bigger than we imagined. The land that belonged to Daniel's great-grandfather is worth over $50 million today. There are powerful businessmen interested in buying it. Grace turned pale. $50 million. I had no idea it was that much money. Daniel partnered with these businessmen, Dr. Henry continued. They're financing a heavy legal battle. They brought lawyers from other states, doctors with impeccable credentials, even a famous psychiatrist willing to attest you have early-onset dementia. But that's a lie, Tyler exploded. My grandparents are perfectly lucid. We know that, but they'll use your grandparents' advanced age, the fact they lost their house, the vulnerability situation. They'll build a convincing case. Robert stood slowly, walking to the window. Henry, there's something I never told anyone, not even Grace. Everyone turned to him surprised. Robert, Grace called, worried. What secret is this? The elderly man took a deep breath before responding. Those lands weren't my grandfather's. They were my grandmother's, Grandma Beatrice. She left a secret will that Daniel never knew existed. What do you mean? Dr. Henry asked, intrigued. My grandmother suspected the men in the family only cared about money. So she made two versions of the will, an official one everyone knows, leaving everything to the family men, and a secret one, leaving everything to whoever truly cared for those in need. The silence in the room was absolute. Where is this secret will? Dr. Henry asked anxiously. Robert smiled sadly. During all these years caring for children, building hospitals and schools, I thought it would never be necessary to use it, but it's stored at the bank in a safety deposit box only I can open. Dad, Grace said, moved. It means Daniel is fighting for something that was never his, Robert completed. The lands belong to whoever dedicated their life to helping others, and according to Grandma Beatrice's will, that person is me. James felt a mixture of relief and concern. But if Daniel discovers this will, he'll do everything to prevent us from accessing it. We need to go to the bank today, Dr. Henry completed. It won't be easy. Dad has people watching all our movements, Tyler warned. If we leave here, he'll know. At that moment, Margaret entered the room with the phone in hand. Mr. James, I have a call for you. Says it's urgent. James answered, and his expression changed completely as he listened. I understand. Thank you for letting me know. Who was it? Dr. Henry asked. My contact at the bank. Daniel was there early this morning with a temporary court order trying to access Robert's safety deposit box. Did he succeed? No, because the order was poorly formulated. But he'll return with more specific documents. Robert approached Grace and held her hands. My dear, the time has come to tell the whole truth. What truth, Grandpa? Tyler asked, confused. Grace looked at her husband with tears in her eyes. Tyler, my medical condition isn't just delicate, it's terminal. The young man was without reaction. James felt the world collapse. Terminal, he repeated, incredulous. The doctors gave me a few months, Grace explained with a serene voice. That's why we lost the house. We spent everything trying experimental treatments. Grandma, Tyler began crying. That's why Daniel was in such a hurry to institutionalize us, Robert said bitterly. He knows Grace doesn't have much time. If he can prove we're incapable before she leaves, he gets everything. Daniel's evil was even deeper than they imagined. He was counting on his own mother's death to inherit the money. We won't let that happen, James said determinedly. We're going to the bank now. It's risky, Dr. Henry warned. But riskier is letting Daniel win, James responded. An hour later, a plan was laid out. Dr. Henry would go to the bank with Robert, while James stayed with Grace and Tyler to distract any surveillance. Margaret would help, creating a situation that would draw attention to the house. The plan worked perfectly until Dr. Henry called from the bank with devastating news. James, we arrived too late. Daniel was here with a new court order. He got access to the safety deposit box. How? Without Robert's presence? He alleged medical emergency, said Robert was hospitalized with acute dementia and needed the documents for treatment. But Robert is here with me. We know that, but he presented very convincing false medical documents. The bank manager was forced to open the box. Robert took the phone from James's hands. Henry, was the will there? It was. Daniel took everything. Despair took over everyone. Without the secret will, Daniel could freely claim the inheritance. Wait, Grace said suddenly. Robert, do you remember the photocopy we made of the will 20 years ago? Photocopy. Robert's eyes widened. The one we kept in the suitcase? Everyone ran to the room where the leather suitcase was stored. With trembling hands, Grace searched among the old papers until she found a laminated folder. Here it is, she shouted. The copy of Grandma Beatrice's secret will. Dr. Henry rushed back from the bank, and when he saw the document, his eyes shone. This changes everything. Even if Daniel has the original, we can prove another will exists. But he'll say it's a forgery, Tyler warned. He won't be able to. This document has a notarized signature from 30 years ago. Daniel wasn't even born when it was made. At that moment, cars stopped in front of the mansion. Daniel had arrived with an even larger convoy. More lawyers, court officers, and this time, even an ambulance. They came to take Grandpa and Grandma by force, Tyler said, terrified. They won't take anyone, James responded. putting the copy of the will in his pocket. Daniel entered through the front door without asking permission, accompanied by 6 people. His face was transfigured by greed. "Dad, Mom," he said coldly, "I came to get you. I have documents proving you need immediate hospitalization." "We're not going anywhere," Grace responded with dignity. "It's no longer your choice. The judge ordered compulsory hospitalization." "Based on false reports," Dr. Henry intervened, showing documents. "We have proof the doctors who signed these reports never examined my clients." Daniel got nervous. "That's a lie." "It's true. And we have one more surprise for you," James said, taking the will copy from his pocket. "Do you know this document?" Daniel looked at the paper and turned pale. "Where did you get that?" "From the same suitcase you despised. Your great-grandmother's secret will, leaving everything to whoever truly helped those in need." "That's a forgery." "With a 30-year-old notarized signature?" Dr. Henry smiled. "Daniel, you lost. The lands were never yours." "Impossible!" Daniel shouted, completely losing his composure. At that moment, Patricia entered the house. She hadn't come with Daniel, but alone, carrying a suitcase. "Daniel," she said with a firm voice, "I came to get Tyler. He's going to live with me." "You're crazy," Daniel exploded. "Tyler is my son. Tyler is a young man who's ashamed of his own father, and so am I." "Patricia." "No, Daniel, it's over. I filed for divorce this morning, and I'm going to testify against you in all the proceedings." The revelation was the final blow. Daniel had lost his son, his wife, the inheritance, and now faced criminal investigation. The court officers, seeing the situation, approached Daniel. "Sir, we need to take you in for questioning about the fraud charges." "No!" Daniel shouted. "You don't understand? I need that money." "For what?" Robert asked sadly. "To buy what you don't have? Respect? Admiration? Success?" "My son," Grace said with a choked voice, "those things can't be bought. They're earned." "Like you earned them?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "Helping everyone and ending up on the streets?" "We ended up with family's love," Grace responded, "with respect from those who truly matter. Do you have that?" Daniel looked around. No one was on his side. Not his wife, not his son, not the lawyers who had been paid to lie. "Daniel," Robert said softly, "there's still time. You can still choose to be different." But Daniel was already being led away by the officers, shouting empty threats no one took seriously anymore. When the house returned to silence, Tyler hugged his grandparents, crying, "Grandpa, Grandma, forgive me for having a father like that." "Son," Grace said, caressing her grandson's hair, "you're not responsible for your father's choices. You're only responsible for your own choices." Patricia approached, embarrassed. "In-laws, forgive me for everything. I should have acted sooner." "Patricia," Robert said, smiling, "courage isn't not being afraid. It's doing the right thing even when afraid." And that afternoon, as the sun set behind the mansion windows, a new family had formed. Not by blood, but by choice, by love, by values that truly matter. The battle was won, but the greatest victory was still to come. 6 months had passed since the legal battle that changed everything. James's mansion had transformed into a truly special house. The cold walls now echoed with warm conversations, genuine laughter, and soft music Grace played on the piano James had bought especially for her. Grandma Beatrice's secret will was validated by 3 different notaries, and Daniel faced investigation for fraud. The Millionaire lands now officially belonged to Robert, but what he did with them surprised even James. "Grace," Robert said on a sunny morning, "the time has come to realize our last great project." Grace, who now received private medical treatment funded by James, smiled with that serenity of someone who had found inner peace. "Have you decided what to do with the lands?" "We decided," James confirmed, spreading architectural plans over the table. "We're going to build the country's largest assistance village. Houses for needy families, school, hospital, cultural center." Tyler, who now studied architecture inspired by his grandfather's work, approached excitedly. "Grandpa, it's going to be amazing. We'll call it Grace Village in Grandma's honor." Grace began crying, but they were tears of joy. Grace Village. What a beautiful name. "It will house 500 families," Robert explained emotionally. "Each house will have the name of a child we helped throughout our lives." Margaret entered the room carrying a tray with coffee. now completely integrated into that unconventional family. "Mr. James, there's a visitor at the door. A lady with a baby." Everyone looked at each other, intrigued. Robert went to the door and found a young woman holding a baby with tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Robert?" she asked, moved. "I'm Marina Santos. You saved my life 15 years ago." Robert observed her for a few moments until memory awakened. "Marina, the girl from St. Teresa Orphanage. My God, how you've grown. You remember me? How could I forget? You were that shy child who loved to draw." Marina broke down crying in Robert's arms. "I came to thank you for everything you did for me, for giving me a chance when no one else believed." "How did you find us?" "I saw a news report on TV about the village you're going to build. I couldn't believe it was the same Uncle Robert and Aunt Grace who raised me." Grace approached and also recognized the girl. "Marina, my little artist, look how beautiful you are." "Aunt Grace, this is my son, Gabriel," Marina said, showing the baby. "I wanted you to meet the grandson you gained." The emotion took over everyone. That child they had welcomed grew up, started a family, and now wanted to share her joy with those who helped her. "Marina," Robert said, curious, "what do you do for a living?" "I'm a pediatrician," she replied proudly. "I work at a public hospital saving underprivileged children, just like you taught me." James approached, moved. Seeing the practical result of Robert and Grace's work was inspiring. "Dr. Marina," he said respectfully, "I'd like to make a proposal. How about being the medical director of Grace Village Hospital?" Marina was speechless. You would offer me that?" "We offer because we know you do the work with love," Grace said. "Just like we always did." "I accept," Marina exclaimed. "It would be an honor to continue your legacy." At that moment, another car stopped in front of the house. To everyone's surprise, Patricia got out accompanied by an unknown man. "Patricia!" Tyler ran to hug his mother. "How good you came." "Tyler, in-laws," she greeted respectfully. "I'd like to introduce someone. This is Dr. Luis, my fiancé." Robert and Grace smiled welcomingly. "Welcome to the family, Dr. Luis." "Actually," Patricia said, hesitant, "I came to bring news about Daniel." The mood became tense. "What happened?" Tyler asked, worried. "He's in prison. He was convicted of fraud, but he sent a letter asking you to visit him." Grace took the letter with trembling hands and read it in silence while everyone waited anxiously. "What does he say?" Robert asked softly. "That he wants to ask for forgiveness," Grace replied emotionally. "That he finally understood the value of what we built. That he's ashamed of everything he did." "Will you visit him?" Patricia asked. Robert and Grace looked at each other with that silent communication of decades of marriage. "We will," Robert said. "He's still our son. Even after everything?" "Especially after everything," Grace completed. "Forgiveness isn't for those who deserve it. It's for those who need it." The wisdom of those words echoed through the room like a profound life lesson. Days later, Robert, Grace, Tyler, and James visited Daniel in prison. The man who received them was completely different from the arrogant lawyer of months ago. Daniel was thin, head down, with eyes reflecting genuine repentance. "Dad, Mom," he said with a choked voice, "I don't even know how to begin asking for forgiveness." "Start from the heart," Grace said softly. "I was so obsessed with money, with status, with others' approval, that I lost sight of what truly matters," Daniel cried. "I lost you. I lost my family. I lost myself." "Daniel," Robert said, "you didn't lose us. We were always here. But how can you forgive me after everything I did?" "Because you're our son," Grace replied, "and a parent's love has no conditions. I don't deserve this forgiveness. No one deserves forgiveness, son. Forgiveness is a gift given because we love." Daniel completely broke down. "I want to change. I want to be different. I want to be the son you deserve." "You already are," Tyler said, hugging his father for the first time in years. "Recognizing your mistakes is the first step to fixing them." James watched that reconciliation scene with his heart tight. Family was truly about forgiveness, second chances, unconditional love. "Daniel," he said, "when you get out of here, there's a place waiting for you at Grace Village. We have lots of social work to do. Would you give me that opportunity?" "Everyone deserves a second chance," Robert replied, "especially family." A year later, Grace Village was ready. 500 colorful houses sheltered families who had left poverty. The hospital, directed by Marina, had already saved hundreds of children. The school operated full-time. The cultural center promoted activities for all ages. At the official inauguration, thousands of people attended. Mayors, governors, businessmen, but mainly the benefited families and all the children Robert and Grace had helped throughout their lives. "Friends," Robert spoke into the microphone with an emotional voice, "this village isn't our achievement. It's all of yours who believed we could build a better world. Grace Village," Grace completed, "represents everything we learned. That true happiness comes from helping others. That family is built with love, not blood, and that it's never too late to start over." Daniel, who had been released and now coordinated the village's social projects, approached the microphone. "Dad, Mom," he said publicly, "I spent my whole life looking for success in the wrong places. Today I understand you were always the richest in the family, rich in love, in purpose, in true legacy." The crowd applauded, moved. Tyler was crying. Patricia and Dr. Luis smiled proudly. Marina held little Gabriel, now over a year old. James went up on stage for the last time. "Robert and Grace saved me when I was a child. They saved me again when I was a lost adult. Today, through Grace Village, they'll continue saving lives for generations. But our greatest victory," he continued, "isn't this village. It's having proven that true family is who we choose to love, who we choose to protect, who we choose to forgive." When the event ended, Robert and Grace walked hand in hand through the streets of the village that had become reality. Children played in the gardens, families talked on the porches, elderly rested in the squares. "We did it, my love," Robert said to Grace. "We fulfilled our mission." "No," she corrected, smiling. "Our mission continues, through all these people who learned to help others." Margaret approached, carrying a chair for Grace to rest. Her medical condition had stabilized with treatment, but still required care. "Mrs. Grace, Mr. James asked me to let you know dinner is ready." "Family dinner," Grace smiled. "The most precious thing in the world." As they walked back to the mansion that had become a true home, Robert looked back one last time. Grace Village shone under the nightlights, full of life, love, and possibilities. "You know what I'm most proud of?" he said to Grace. "What?" "That when we leave this world, we'll leave it better than we found it. And we'll leave knowing we were truly loved," Grace completed. From afar, James watched the couple walking slowly, supporting each other, as they had done for decades. Those two elderly people he found abandoned in the rain had changed not only his life, but the lives of thousands of people. The lesson was complete. It doesn't matter where you were born, how much money you have, or what clothes you wear. What matters is how you treat people, especially those who can't repay your kindness. Robert and Grace proved that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in lives transformed, smiles awakened, hopes renewed. And when James entered the house that night, he found his family gathered in the living room. Robert telling stories, Grace playing piano, Tyler studying, Daniel planning new social projects, Marina nursing Gabriel, Patricia and Dr. Luis helping Margaret in the kitchen. This is how it should be. This is how it should always have been. A family built not by blood, but by the choice to love without conditions, forgive without limits, and help without expecting anything in return. If this story moved you, imagine how many other people need to hear this today. Subscribe, so you don't miss any story that can change lives. Share this video. You might be helping someone at exactly the right moment. Your support keeps stories like this coming to you every day. Thank you for being part of this family.